Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Judson Memorial Church. How are you? Happy Pride. It's so wonderful to have you all here, and I'm sure that in true Judson Pride fashion, we'll have a few stragglers come in as they make their way from the train. And I'm sure that you saw the amazing ACT UP folks outside who are setting up a health fair today for when the Queer Liberation March exits into the Washington Square Park and then is made available to tons of health facilities and support, and then they are going to come into our space and we'll have food and restrooms and drinks for them. So you are welcome to stick around for as long as you would like today. I will be here because I'm not marching anywhere with this glittered broken ankle, but I have glittered it for you so you don't feel too bad for me. My name is Micah. If we haven't met, my pronouns are he and they, and I'm the senior minister here at Judson. And I want you to take a second. Oh, thanks. I like being senior minister. It's fun. I want you to take a moment and look at that camera right there and raise up your hands and give a big wave to the Judson diaspora that's joining us online, led by Reverend Dr. Valerie Hope Holly. Hello, Rev. Hello, Judson Diaspora. We feel your pride entering this space. We love you, and we are sending tons of glittery love right to you through that screen. And this is a moment in our service where we start with announcements. I've got something of an announcement before we go into our service, but is there anyone else who would like to share anything before we go officially into our service? Okay, beautiful. So I'm going to give you a little outline officially for this day. When this service ends, there will be food provided for you in the back. Everything provided for you today is vegan, except for the milk, if you want to put that into your coffee. But everything else is vegan, so if you eat vegan, like myself, you can eat that. If you don't eat vegan typically, welcome. It's so exciting to have you eating vegan today. Be proud. As we exit this space after we eat, we will also then move into the 239 office door, where if you would like to hang out, you're welcome to hang out with me and welcome folks with hospitality and restrooms. If you would like to actually go to the Queer Liberation March and march, you are welcome to do so. You're also welcome to take one of the queer saints that is surrounding us today with you. The only thing that we ask is that you make sure that that queer saint ends up back at our space at the end of the day. So, come and find me if you'd like to take one of these queer saints, and we would love for you to take that wherever you will be marching today. And I want you to take just a moment before we go into our land acknowledgement and look around at the saints who are witnessing us today. There are probably names that you recognize, names that you don't recognize. This is just a handful of queer saints who have gone before us and paved the path, not only for the LGBTQ community, but for all of humanity. Because here at Judson, what the word queer means for us, when you are looking at the bulletin cover and you hear us say that God is queer and delights in your queerness, we want you to understand that as something that is available to you, whether you consider yourself part of the LGBTQ community or just an ally. Because if you are just an ally, you're not just an ally. Queerness is available to you. Queerness is available to each and every one of us because, as Bell Hooks says, queer is not about being who you're having sex with, though that can be a dimension of it. Queer is about the self that is at odds with everything around it and that has to invent and create and find a place to speak and to thrive and to live. So what you have available to you is the capacity and the invitation to continue to queer yourself every day. Just when you think you've gotten queer enough, you're not there yet. queer yourself even further. That's what we mean when we say that God is queer, because God is that force that is inviting you into further queering of yourself every day. So, in that vein, I would love for you to join me in the land acknowledgement and commitment to action. You don't have to read the words out loud, but just listen to these words, feel them in your body, and find what they mean for you and your continual queering. These are remixed from words by Octavia E. Butler, who you see witnessing us right over here. Judson's physical space stands on the ancestral land of the Munsee Lenape people. Our community acknowledges the Lenape community, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations, and we make this acknowledgement as only one part of our work to dismantle the ongoing legacies of Christian supremacy, settler colonialism, and white supremacy. We also commit to change. Everything you touch, you change. Everything you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. Therefore, if we refuse to change, we run the risk of being godless. But if we will commit to looking back at where we've been, looking honestly at who we are, and looking forward to who we can become, we might just touch God. We believe this truth, and belief initiates and guides action, or it does nothing. So, what does community look like in the face of this truth? What does commitment look like in the face of this truth? What does the future look like in the face of this truth? We not only acknowledge the past, but we commit to present action. Our futures await our willingness to change. You're going to have tons of opportunity to commit to change throughout this service. And here comes chance 1. Please rise in body and or spirit and turn to page 8, and we're going to join in singing Quirky, Queer, and Wonderful. y'all did a great job with that one. You got 3 more chances throughout this service. And folks who are just arriving, look over here. Look at the amazing saints over here. Look at the amazing saints-to-be who are sitting here. There are some empty seats. So don't feel like you have to stay in the back over there. You can fill in over here as well. Can we have a round of applause for Zalman Kelber, who is filling in for Henco Espag this morning? Zalman, thank you so much. And that din-da-da-da that you put into that song, that was everything I needed for this morning. Thank you so, so much. We have some other guest artists who I am so excited to have here, who I will introduce momentarily. But if you do not have context for the saints who are surrounding us in this circle, in just a moment, we are going to enjoy a video from Tseng, who is one of our co-moderators of the board right now, but who's also beautiful. Be a Nick and a Mackie. Great modeling, folks. Thank you. Tseng couldn't be with us because they are in Lisbon, of all places. So beyond sending jealousy rays their way, let's also listen to Jason speak about exactly what the Queer Saints Project means to them and then to our community. So folks, let's roll Jason and have them come straight in from Lisbon.
Good morning, Judson. My name is Tseng. I use they, them pronouns, and I am one of your co-moderators. But I'm actually speaking to you today in my role as the lead artist behind the Queer Saints Project. And for those of you who don't know, the Queer Saints Project is a community art project that is a collaboration between myself and the church, where we take queer ancestors and we venerate them by creating icons of them. We use those icons in various things, like putting them onto poster boards and marching with them in our Queer Liberation March contingent, but also creating sacred objects like candles or other things and incorporating them into our personal spiritual practices. And so this project started a few years ago when Micah asked me to create some art to accompany our contingent in the Queer Liberation March. And at first it was, just a desire to kind of march with our forebears, to have this, to kind of make present the giants in our history that kind of led us to this point, and in many ways guide the movement of queer liberation into its future. But as for me personally, as each time I create a new saint, it's really fascinating, the experience, because on one hand there's like the actual task of like finding the person that we want to honor, doing the research and learning about this person's story, and then it's finding archival images, finding relevant kind of narrative like points, biographical facts that help inform the kinds of flora and fauna that go into their halo. All of that really, for me personally, as an artist who creates these images, brings them to life for me in a way that feels more than just putting pen to paper. It feels like an enfleshment, and that's something that I've really begun to appreciate with this project, is that it allows these people to become real and present for me and us. I've spoken to a lot of people who have deeply profound experiences seeing some of these images in the march, in a church, seeing these faces that they've never seen, surrounded by the kind of sacred imagery that we're using. That's very powerful to me. Partially it's because, we as queer people have been removed from the sacred story that we tell each other for so long. And the mere act of reclaiming sacred queerness is a revolutionary act and deeply fulfilling is not quite the right word. I think it's liberating. Yeah, so thank you everyone for continuing to support this project, and I hope you have a really wonderful worship.
Thank you so much, Jason. We feel you here with us. And folks, please rise in body and/or spirit, and let's acknowledge that we are a people both as we raise the roof off this place. Please be seated. And acknowledging what Jason pulled us into in talking about the ways that queer folks have continuously been erased from the sacred stories of traditions and dominant religions, dominant narratives, you don't get a sermon today. Instead, you get like 88 sermons. And before you panic, we're gonna get out of here eventually. But instead of a preacher getting up here and preaching at you today, we are going to do something communal. We need to acknowledge that in a country where there are 500 anti-trans bills insidiously making their way through this country, in a place where people armed with guns are hanging out outside drag shows, in a place where there are people actively trying to take away any kind of progress and evolution that queer folks have moved us toward in this country, what you are doing right now, you might just think that you're sitting in a room. You might just think that you're here for some nice music and to sing together, but you are doing a radical act. you are doing something revolutionary right now. And we are moving toward a time where hopefully that won't be a radical act, where hopefully that won't be a revolutionary act. But right now, what we are doing here is radical, and it is revolutionary. So, we have a cornucopia of queer members of the Judson community who today are going to share with you one story of a queer saint who has paved the way for them and made them move even more authentically into who they are. So this glorious parade of unicorns is going to start with KP Tacconi. So KP, come on up here.
Happy Pride, everyone. Last year, I went to MoMA PS1 when Rashid Johnson's piece Stage was on display in the courtyard. In case you didn't see it, it basically looked like a yellow platform with a bunch of microphones on it. And I walked up to the microphone and I said, "Trans people are a gift." And I don't know if this was supposed to happen, but the speakers then started playing a recording, and it was almost as if it was a response to what I said. And as I listened, I realized that it was a recording of someone reading from Polly Murray's autobiography called Song in a Weary Throat. And in that moment, I felt like it was almost as if God was saying, "Yep, they are. Yep, my Saint Polly Murray is a gift." Reflecting on Polly Murray and her legacy gives me a lot of hope. Polly Murray has an amazing legacy of social justice work, and like a lot of social justice workers, the things that she worked for during her lifetime may not have come to fruition while she was alive to see them happen. She, for example, was denied entry into Harvard Law because she was a woman. She was arrested for sitting in whites-only section. Also, I should correct that. Because she was perceived as a woman, gender expansiveness, especially posthumously, is complicated to talk about, and I want to be really sensitive to that. She also was arrested for sitting in the whites-only section of a bus, and she couldn't publicly love who she loved, and she is a gender-expansive person when she had to make up her own language for what that meant, and had interesting conversations with her doctors about her body and medical things, and couldn't really get good answers from them about it. Also, most of her life, women couldn't be priests, or female-presenting humans couldn't be priests. But then in 1977, she was part of the turning of the tide in the church and became the first Black woman ordained as an Episcopal priest. I also think that's funny, considering her gender identity. You could say that's, again, trans people leading the way. But what gives me hope is that her fight and her questions lay the path for rights that we get to know today. And I think especially today where sometimes I can get really discouraged about civil rights issues, it's amazing to look back and realize, oh, change happened. And Polly Murray was part of that. In my life, I could choose any university I wanted to go to. I can go to seminary. I can be publicly out. I can use she, they pronouns in my work signature. And I can work for a healthcare company that offers gender-affirming care, which is a right we need to continue to defend. And now, empowering on with the work of justice, the work set before us in our time, I take a lot of encouragement from Polly's legacy. She famously said, you may have heard this quote, that one person plus one typewriter constitutes a movement. That each of us can use our words and our circles of influence to build on the great work of the ancestors who came before us. And also, one day we will all be ancestors, and I really hope that those future generations can look back on the work that we collectively did with our words and say, oh, change happened. So I hope we all take encouragement this Pride Sunday to continue the work of queer saints and to speak into being the loving world that we want to live in.
Amen. Thank you so much, KP. And thank you, Polly Murray. You see Polly witnessing us over here. And now I'd love to welcome up Keenan Hurley to share as well. Come on up, Keenan.
Hi, I'm Keenan. I use they, them pronouns. So in 2018, I was working as a technician at Performance Space New York, formerly known as PS 122. I went into work one day and I didn't know much about what I was doing that day, other than that I was working sound for an event. Someone was renting the space. And I came in and I was handed a run of show for what that event was to be. And I saw this list of incredible, just queer legends. Justin Vivian Bond, Peppermint, Zachary Drucker, Our Lady J. And I said, what am I working today? And I was told that I was working the memorial service for Jack Dorishaw, better known as Flawless Sabrina. Flawless Sabrina was a drag pioneer. Was born in 1939 in Philadelphia, and first was introduced to drag when visiting New York in the 1950s, and saw a drag pageant, started trying to do them in Philadelphia, and noticed that when hosting the pageants in a suit, it just didn't feel the same, and so Sabrina was born so that she could start hosting the pageants. This led to her starting the Miss America Camp Beauty Contest, which was a huge drag pageant, and at its peak, Sabrina employed up to 100 people, which probably makes her the biggest employer of queer people in the country at that point. And it led to the filming of the iconic documentary, The Queen, which, if anyone has seen, you've probably seen Crystal LaBeija. Flawless Sabrina was on the other end of Crystal LaBeija's sort of iconic speech, I'm beautiful, and I know I'm beautiful. And yeah, so that was a huge success. Sabrina later went on to work in LA as a consultant on homosexuality for many films, including Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Lived in Paris as a time, and I've heard worked as a private investigator. And before returning to New York and being part of the downtown underground art scene in the 1980s. And so obviously had this incredible, moving artistic life. But in that day in 2018, as I was witnessing all these people speak about Jack, Sabrina, and all these people perform in her honor, I just remember thinking as a young artist, I was so moved by her body of work, but even more I was moved by what a pillar of the community that she was. And she housed and mentored, some say hundreds of queer people in her time, including Cheyenne Dorishaw, who some of you might be familiar with, the activist and founder of Glitz, who took her last name from Jack. And I just, yeah, to be an artist is a profoundly moving thing, but to be a pillar of a community, those ripples will live on forever. And though I never got to meet Sabrina, just having that moment to encounter her spirit and her legacy is a voice that lives in me strongly today. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Keenan. Thank you, Mother Flawless Sabrina. And many people, I keep looking out at these faces. My goodness, there are people I haven't seen in years. Wow. Rosie, welcome. Holy cow. So folks, we know, many of us, if you've been around Judson for a while, that here at Judson, we don't know how to be a church unless we are welcoming artists into our space, because we truly believe that artists have the potential to serve as our modern day prophets. And there is a prophet who has been in my life for decades now. And she is about to perform here with 3 other folks. And I am bursting out of my glittery skin like some rabid fangirl because they are here. So I'm gonna welcome up Lisa Stephen Friday. I just called you a prophet, so no pressure. We've also got Joseph Ritsch, who is going to explain exactly what their creative offering is about. And then we've got Carmen and Adam, who are going to perform with them. So, folks, tell us about Greer and Candy.
Hi, y'all. Happy Pride. So I'm Joseph Ritsch. I'm the book writer and lyricist for a new musical entitled Doll Girl. You've met my creative partners on this. Part synth pop concert, part living puppet show, part fever dream, Doll Girl is inspired by the life and work of Greer Langton. Greer was a trans visual artist who was a contemporary of Andy Warhol and Basquiat, yet never had the recognition that they did. Greer was known for incredibly evocative dolls, which ranged from a few inches tall to life-size. The dolls often incorporated elements of Greer's life, including her struggle with substance abuse as well as mental health. The dolls also represented her joy, relationships, and political voice as an artist, which often challenged the definitions of gender and identity. Today, we are honored to be presenting 2 songs. The first entitled Unsung Love Song. This is Lisa and my imagined meeting between Greer and Candy Darling of Warhol's Factory fame. Greer was mesmerized with Candy and created several Candy dolls. Unfortunately, Candy passed away before Greer landed in New York City. Greer seemed to be haunted by the regret of never getting to meet one of her muses. The second song is entitled Phone Book of the Dead. This song was inspired by a brief interview with Greer where she talks about losing so many friends and lovers with the onset of the AIDS crisis. She talked about crossing out names and phone numbers when someone passed away, and then adding their names to a list she created in the back of her phone book. She said she had to stop when she reached 40. You can imagine how overwhelming it was for Lisa and I to see the actual phone book and the list on our recent trip to spend the day in the Langton archives at the Mattress Factory Museum in Pittsburgh. For Lisa and I, this is the song Greer would have written as a love letter to the lost. We present to you our 2 songs from Dargo.
Conversation we never had, the conversation we never had. Like a ghost just floating there, my glamour twin pulled from thin air. My muse, my muse, my factory muse. A replica so hard to share, a soul I'm driven so to bear. Wrote, but never sent, an invite out, but never went, a smile that was never smiled, a phone call never died, a cigarette we never shared, my eyes toward yours, but never paired, my eyes toward yours, but never paired.
The conversation we never had, the conversation we never had. Like a mirror staring hovering there, my glamour twin pulled from thin air. Your muse, your factory muse. Like visions present from the past, like Alice from the looking glass. A letter wrote, but never sent. An invite out, but never went. A smile that was never smiled. A phone call never dialed. A cigarette we never shared. My eyes toward yours, but never paired. My eyes toward yours, but never paired.
A softness that was never touched, but my longing always bear.
A girl who saw just who I was, but you still looked on with care.
Indeed, a mouth so sweet to taste, but my lips not landing there.
My face reflected in your eyes, longing always shared.
A love song we never sung,
But the notes were always there.
This is our love song we never sung.
And the notes can feel the
A letter wrote, but never sent. An invite out, but never went. A smile that was never smiled. Phone call never dialed. Cigarette we never shared. My eyes toward yours, but never paired. In a love song, an unsung love song. This is our love song, our unsung love song. This is our love song we never shared.
When a name is just a name, a number's just a number. When all the writing looks the same, a memory to remember. Here on the page, letters have no meaning. Here on the page, numbers don't add up. In my phone book of the dead, move from one side to another, crossed out here and scribbled there, when one list outweighs the other. But you hang there in my head, haunted friends or haunted lovers. In this place I'm better off dead, in this ghost town gone forever. Here and you are gone, when I have been as bold and reckless When will the last of you be drawn? Will I ever feel less helpless? Here on the page I stopped at 40. Here on the page it's just too much. In my phone book of the dead, moved from one side to another, crossed out here and scribbled there. When one list outweighs the other, but you hang there in my head. Haunted friend or haunted lover, in this place I'm better off dead. In this ghost town gone forever. Why am I still here in a world that's made for others? No path seems clear. You are gone, so I walk alone. All the boys have disappeared from the cancer of their lovers. Love and lust has killed our brothers. When a name's just a name, when a number's just a number, when all the writing looks the same, limber to remember. Here on the page letters have no meaning. Here on the page it's just too much. In my phone book of the dead, moved from one side to another, crossed out here and scribbled there. When one list outweighs the other, but you hang there in my head. Haunted friend or haunted lover, in this place I'm better off dead. In this ghost town gone forever. Forever.
Thank you so much, Lisa and Joseph and Carmen and Adam. Thank you for blessing our space and resacralizing it today. And thank you, Greer. Thank you for bringing Greer's story. And watch out for more, because I hope that's not the last time we hear about Greer or hear those songs in this space. Do I see Lyla Bowhem around here? Lyla, come on up here. Welcome back to Judson. We're so happy to have you. Tell us about a queer saint.
It's lovely to be back here. I was only a year out as trans when Silvio Rivera found me. A friend pulled up a grainy black and white video on YouTube of a woman in a dazzling, glittery jumpsuit climbing onto a stage and yelling at a riled crowd, "Y'all better quiet down." I watched in admiration and anxiety as she was booed for her admonitions, her call out to the 1973 Pride Parade, which had banned drag queens from attending, that she and others like her were being neglected and abused. And in a master class of rhetoric by the end of her speech, in which she shared from the depths of her struggle and experience, this fierce femme had the crowd cheering for gay power. I wondered who this woman was, so grounded in herself that she could not only survive on the margins, but bring those margins to the center. I wondered what it was like back then to transition, when hormone therapy and gender-affirming surgery were but budding experiments. I wondered if I could ever be so brave enough to be who I felt myself to be, even if that also meant being an outsider among outsiders. In truth, I ran away from Silvia Rivera. I was scared I could never be like her, let alone be like myself. But Silvia Rivera stayed with me through those years I spent running. Her prophetic voice not only demanding, but making the space for herself and other trans women was both an unreachable but inescapable beacon, shining light on questions I tried but failed to answer. Her passionate advocacy found me through stories and landmarks of queer history, challenging me to find my place among them. And then she found me again in the Judson basement. Days before the first Queer Liberation March commemorating the Stonewall riots she helped to inaugurate. I had just started taking estrogen. And now her saintly figure was there before me, beckoning again to be with her sparkling image. And as I decorated her with ribbon and glitter, I felt myself caring for her as she had cared for me. I still felt afraid. I still feel afraid, but I felt a friendship in my fear. I was not alone. From the trans ancestral realm, from the queer on after, Silvia Rivera was in this with me, and I was with her. I'm blessed to care and be cared for by Saint Rivera.
Thank you so much, Lyla. Now, Zalman, if you would accompany us, please rise in body and or spirit as we continue to hear about this love. Let's sing together, Love is the Touch. Be seated. Lance, come up and tell us about your queer saint.
Good morning, Judson. So, lovely to see so many beautiful faces here. Keen, your hair's down today. I haven't seen that in like forever. So, cute. So, I guess I was struggling with picking somebody, and I was working this out with Micah a couple days ago, and I switched. So now I'm doing Bayard Rustin instead of James Baldwin. In part because I think, at least on this point, it speaks, I guess, the duality of identity. So for those of you who don't know, Bayard Rustin was an activist born in 1912. He passed away in 1987. And he was born in Pennsylvania, I think in Westchester, if I'm not mistaken, or just Chester. I get the Chesters confused. But he was raised by his grandparents, and one of whom I believe his grandmother was a Quaker. And so he was influenced by both Christian and Quaker theologies. And apparently he was out, but not out, if that makes sense. Meaning in his private life, everyone knew that he was gay. He didn't hide it or anything like that. But publicly in terms of the role he took with respect to activism, it wasn't always known by folks. And he was actually arrested in the 1950s when he was in California for the crime of sodomy. And he actually pled down to a lesser charge, but it required him to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life. He was later, I think the governor of California, many decades later, pardoned him posthumously for that. But it made it a difficult thing for him to try to, I guess, take a more public role in the civil rights movement. So he was active with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and some of the other groups, with Martin Luther King Jr. and some others. And he was one of the architects of the 1964 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And yet, because of his identity and the criminal conviction as well, he was forced to take much more of a, I guess, a backstory role in organizing that, and it led to him being ostracized a lot of times from the civil rights movement. It was constantly brought up whenever anybody was having him, I guess, advocate for certain things. And he had to go back to the side. Sometimes he actually had to lose allies. And at one point, Martin Luther King Jr. was forced to disassociate himself from that because they were threatening to put out stories about the two of them having an affair. And so, with this aspect of duality where he identified as a gay person, but he also obviously identified as a black person, and those two dual, I guess, conflicting identities were something he had to always live with throughout his life. He has somewhat of a history here in New York City as well. Back in the 1960s and 70s, he was leading efforts to try to desegregate the public schools in New York City. And that led to tension, which we still see today. We see remnants of that today. It led to tension with white allies in the community, because when you mess with people and their kids in their schools, feelings start to change. And someone may be very, very pro-equality, but the thought of their kid going to a school that's not quite as good, all of a sudden things change in terms of commitment to the causes. And so that was another, I guess, tension that we still see to this day with the public schools in New York City. You wouldn't think that New York City in 2023 still looks as segregated residentially and educationally as it did 60 or 70 years ago. But not to digress too much, one thing I remember particularly, it was maybe about 15 or 20 years ago, because I'm old now, but when I was a young adult and a young professional, I met Mr. Rustin's partner, who was about 30 years his junior, was Caucasian, and he actually spoke at the event and actually found something here on Wikipedia, which actually reminded me, and all these memories came flooding back when he was talking about this. Because gays had no rights at certain points in time, as we can all remember, he actually was adopted by Rustin. That was the only way they could protect their relationship. And he is describing in there, and I'm saying, oh my God, I remember him saying this. I spoke with him afterwards. They had like a little mini coffee hour after the event. He was very friendly. But he described that basically how, I guess, the government agency that does it, because they allowed you to adopt adults, but they had to come, his mother had to sign a paper disowning him so that where he was deemed parentless so that he could be adopted. They literally interviewed his mother, interviewed the couple, and they had to determine that Mr. Rustin would provide a good enough home for him, even though he was like 30-something years old. But that's the steps they had to do to take on to try to, protect their relationship, because there was no domestic partnership, there were no civil unions, obviously there was no marriage equality. That's what he had to do. Just bizarre to think about technically marrying your child. I mean, that's just bizarre, but that's what they had to do in order to protect their relationship. It said here also that he was very good friends with the late Justice Thurgood Marshall, the first black justice of the Supreme Court. And Justice Marshall's law clerk, Daniel Richmond, actually is on record as saying that their relationship was influential in Justice Marshall dissenting in the 5-4 decision in 1986 Bowers versus Hardwick, in which the Supreme Court said it was perfectly fine to criminalize homosexuality. He was one of the dissenters in the 5-4, and he wrote his separate dissent on that. And I guess that's kind of an example right there about people who are out, and just sometimes, as Micah mentioned earlier, being out is in and of itself radical. In and of itself, it's a political statement. And that was something where, just by virtue of that relationship, helped to influence the Supreme Court justice to actually see the humanity of gay people and say, of course it's unconstitutional to say that gay people can be criminalized just for being intimate with their loved ones. And I do remember that was a 5-4 split. Many years later, obviously, since it was only 5-4, one of the justices in the five-member majority had actually commented that he felt that that was one of the decisions that if he could ever take back and switch votes, he would. And in part because he had a law clerk who was closeted when he served for him. And many years later, the law clerk came out to him, and that influenced him to think that was one of my decisions that was wrong. So it's one of those things where I guess we walk this dual line between which identity you are actually publicly identifying as, which one you're actually embracing, and how just existing in a space can actually affect other people, and they see your humanity. And so I just remember with him, that was one of the queer saints that I thought really influenced me, because I've always thought about that, the duality of being both black and being gay, and just how people will perfectly allow you to claim that identity in whatever space you're in, and having to always justify that. And so for that, I remember by Rustin for his contributions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lance, and thank you, Bayard Rustin. And now with the last of our planned Queer Saints testimonies, Lisa Holton, come on up and tell us about your saint.
Hi, Judson. I'm Lisa. My pronouns are she, her. And today I would like to celebrate my dear friend, Carol DeSanti, who is still very much here and doing great work in the world. So Carol and I met at the Radcliffe Publishing course in the summer of 1983. And at the end of the course, a bunch of us went down to New York, and we slept on each other's couches, and we tried to find extremely low-paying, much-coveted entry-level jobs in publishing. In 1983, there was not a single out lesbian in mainstream publishing. There were several out gay men, but publishing was a serious old boys network at that time. As a woman, there were a lot of ways you could kill your career before it even started, and coming out was definitely one of them. But Carol got into publishing to serve her community, and she also wanted to shift the culture at large. She knew how many talented writers were being shut out by the gatekeepers and how many more readers wanted and needed to see themselves on the pages. So Carol dove in, becoming the first out lesbian in mainstream publishing. When Carol published Sarah Schulman's novel After Dolores, she surprised the industry by demonstrating that a book with, wait for it, a lesbian protagonist actually had a market. And I can just imagine the astonishment on some of those executive floors when Dorothy Allison's first novel, Bastard Out of Carolina, made such a deep, profound impact on its readers. Carol was and is a great editor because she does two opposite things really well. The first is she works really closely with each writer. She helps them produce their very best work, and she creates this beautiful, creative, and emotional sanctuary that they can feel safe in. And then she marches into the conference room and fights like hell for her authors at every step of the way. But she didn't just do that for her authors. Carol helped found the Publishing Triangle. And that was originally just a support group for gay and lesbian professionals, but they quickly realized if their authors were ever going to be seen, they had to do it themselves. So as a collective, they found incredibly creative ways to get attention for their authors, and they were relentless in breaking down the barriers that Empire constructed to prevent queer writers from reaching a wider audience. So working within the system to try to dismantle it takes its toll. And I asked Carol how she managed to deal with the constant barrage of homophobia and misogyny, and I love her answer. She says, it was the gay men who supported my efforts, especially the late, great Michael Dennedy at St. Martin's. I remember and cherish Michael's friendship, and as a young editor, his lack of misogyny, his publishing savvy and encouragement. His belief in building a whole community, his passion for books, and his passion for the editorial profession is a really important part of it. It was that spirit that gave me the courage and support to carry on through many storms to come. And there were many, many storms. But in spite of them, Carol went on to publish a dizzying array of diverse voices. Terry McMillan, Ruth Ozeki, Melissa Bank, just to name a few. She did it with grace, a very dry sense of humor, and incredible tenacity. Carol has also been a deeply kind and generous friend. A mere 20 years into our friendship, I figured out I was gay. When I asked her if she'd known, she cocked her head, she smiled. She did not say, "Oh, honey, who didn't know?" Which she totally could have. But instead, she nodded and said, "Yes, everyone needs to move at their own pace." And even though at the time I was running the largest children's book division in the industry, my coming out was like a non-event because I was standing on Carol's shoulders and on everyone she helped shepherd into the literary world. So thank you, Carol, my dear friend, for your brilliant editorial skills, your friendship. And as we continue to celebrate Pride this week, I invite us all to go out and buy a book by a queer writer this week, because Empire is trying to erect all kinds of new barriers to keep queer writers from the audiences they need them, and let's just not let them do it. Okay, happy Pride.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you, Carol. Buy a book, everybody, and buy several banned books while you're doing it. So I want you to take a moment. If you feel safe in this space, just close your eyes or just soften your gaze. Think back through the testimonies that have been shared the past 45 or so minutes. Connect that to the icons you see surrounding us. And hold in your heart, if you haven't already had one bubble up, who is a queer saint in your life? Someone who has invited you to become even more who you already are. You've done it lovingly. And hold that person in your heart and add them to the cloud of witnesses that have been conjured in this space this morning. If you have your eyes closed, go ahead and open them. And now is the moment, we're getting close to the end of our service. But now's the moment where we invite monetary gifts. So there will be old-fashioned baskets going around this space. You're at church after all. If you would like to give online, there are multiple ways that you can do that are listed in your bulletin. If you'd like to go through technology to give. But we don't want you to give without also receiving another creative offering. So we've got all of these saints looking out at us. But even when they're not physically in this space, this place always has a patron saint of fabulosity. And Ruby Rims is about to come up, and accompanied by Zalman, remind us to be who we are.
I am a friend of several of these saints. Hi, girl. I am a fat little white gay boy who grew up in Newark, New Jersey. I am a survivor of fag bashing. I am a survivor of AIDS. I am a survivor of suicide. I am the first drag queen to ever perform at the Anvil. And I am one crazy ass bitch. I am what I am. I am my own special creation. So, come take a look. Give me the hook or the ovation. Stop! It's my world that I want to have a little pride in. My world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say, hey world, I am what I am. I am what I am. I don't want praise. I don't want pity. I bang my own drum. Some think it's noise. I think it's pretty. And so what if I love his sparkle and his spangle? Why not try to see things from a different angle? Your life is a sham till you can say, hey world, I am what I am. I am what I am, and what I am needs no excuses. I deal my own deck, sometimes the ace, sometimes the deuces. There's one life, and there's no return and no deposit. One life, so it's time to open up your closet. Life's not worth a damn till you can say, hey world, I am what I And I am a candidate this Tuesday. Vote.
Thank you so, so much, Ruby. Would you all please rise in body and or spirit? Look around this space. Look at these saints again, and look at the people who share this space and have co-created this space with you. Look over at Oakley here, who has been making noise through this service. The future here. Become who you already are. After you leave this space, even as this service is ending, our service in the world continues. What is happening out there is bullying, and we have always known how to deal with bullies. You just be more who you are. You raise more queer joy. You spread more queer love. You keep telling queer stories. So don't let them try to erase us. You and your love and your joy is a radical, hopeful act in this world. You are a saint becoming the saint who you already are. And we're going to sing about that in a second. Amen. Happy Pride, everyone. Thank you so much to our testifiers this morning. Turn back to this camera right here and bid adieu to all of the Zoom saints who are joining us right now. Reverend Dr. Valerie Hope Holly, thank you for leading folks, not only in today's Zoom room, but for the last years here. We love you, love you, love you. Have a good celebration and concern and prayer time. So here's what we're going to do. We have food arriving. You can feel free to have a seat.